Seems like it starts like this every year. We begin this Advent season after this 4-day weekend of gluttony and football. And so I have to preach to a crowd that's had their fill of turkey. And what is it in turkey that puts us to sleep besides Steve Williams' sermons? There's something in it that just kind of brings that relaxed feeling that we have. So I'm talking to a crowd that is just kind of waking up from that Thanksgiving whatever. It's that feeling of tiredness. And so as we come together, it is our time of Advent, which Advent is a Latin term for coming. And so as we anticipate the coming of Christ, it is a liturgical time of the year. We also take a look at the apocalyptic scriptures that are shared in Revelation, as well as those bizarre dreams that we read about in Daniel and Ezekiel. We hear some in some of the gospel texts of the second coming of Christ. The second coming of Christ. And so this morning, I thought I'd take a dab at that, because normally I spend my time through Christmas playing our trump card. That is, we're getting ready for Christmas, so let us prepare our hearts. But there are some important scriptures for us to look at in the second coming of Christ. Now listen to these words from Matthew. But about that day and hour no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. For as the days of Noah were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing until the flood came and swept them away. So too will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then two will be in the field, and one will be taken and one will be left. 2 women will be grinding meal together. One will be taken and one will be left. Keep awake, therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. These are scriptures that have troubled and we have misunderstood and struggled with through the centuries of understanding Jesus' words. I don't want to trivialize these words, and I want us to remember that we must take them serious. Whether Jesus is speaking metaphorically in the sense of how he often spoke, in the sense of hiding behind them some other truths. We must take these words seriously. So as we begin this Advent season, as we remember that Christmas is coming, we come this morning with that anticipation and that we have as we're preparing our homes with the trees, the lights, and the decorations, and the manger scenes. But we also must, as Christians, anticipate his second coming. What is important for us to realize is that many of our understandings of that second coming have been formed by these series of books called the Left Behind series, written by Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins. They were, in a sense, written by their own interpretation of what the coming of Christ would be like. The only fear that we had was that we would be those who were left behind. Left behind. And that's where Matthew, these verses from 40 and 41 come from, and where they base their books. Where 2 men are out and standing in their field, and one is taken and one is left behind. And 2 women are grinding grain. One is taken and one is left behind. This story that Jesus is sharing is very personal. We see, when we visited the Holy Land, we saw many of those grinding stones. And what women would be doing would be sitting across from one another. Their hands would be overlapped, having the stone, and there would be like a trough between them. They would lay the grain between, and then crossing over their hands, they would go back and forth to make their wheat, to make their bread. they would be so close to one another that they would feel each other's breath. One would be taken and the other would be left behind. These are scriptures that have caused us much concern about over the centuries, as many denominations have been created by the fact that they thought that Christ was coming and that Christ was coming and it was going to be very imminent. In the recent news, there's been a lot of discussion about the Seventh-day Adventists. In Nevada, there was a part of that community, the south part of town, that was very much a part of the Seventh-day Adventist school. There was a broom factory that was down there. And they worship on Saturdays because it is the seventh day. And they also believe that Christ is coming. They're a part of those groups that had began early by a prophecy, where they basically stood upon a mountain, on a hillside, waiting so that they could see Christ's appearance. The Adventists also believe in a bodily resurrection. That is taken scripturally, but a bodily resurrection in the sense that is different than what we believe. They believe that they lay their loved ones in a grave. And then when that glorious day comes, when Christ comes again, as they're lying in their grave asleep, they awaken. And then they rise from the grave as Christ comes to the world. Well, and one of my favorite authors, Peter Gulley is the Garrison Keillor of religious writers. He writes oftentimes about his hometown called Harmony, the fictitious town that is in Indiana, as Keillor writes about Lake Wobegon. He writes of his childhood, and he writes of a man named Walter. Walter is the one who digs the graves for the community of Harmony. He's the grave digger. But Walter is also a Seventh-day Adventist. And so, for his loved ones and those close to him, instead of digging the typical 6-foot grave, he would dig a 5-foot grave so his loved ones wouldn't have to work so hard as they're crawling themselves out of the grave when Christ comes again. And then for his mother, so that she wouldn't have to work so hard and sweat when she dug out of her grave, because she had worked all of her life. Her grave was only 4 foot deep. But if you love someone, you want them not to have to work so hard. So our understanding of what is the second coming of Christ really is based on our understanding of heaven. For us as United Methodists, we believe that heaven is a spiritual place. Our bodies die, and our spirits leave to return with God. And we base that basically on Jesus' testimony to the disciples in the upper room in the 14th chapter of John, as he's gathered there with his disciples before he himself is crucified, to give them words of comfort and encouragement. In my Father's house are many rooms. I will go there and prepare a place for you, and that I will come again and take you there myself. Where I am, you may be also. That is the basis of us as Methodists believe that it is a spiritual place, heaven is, where we will receive new bodies that are spiritual in a sense, but also because Christ will recognize us, we have this understanding that we will recognize one another. So it is like a grand reunion. On Thanksgiving Day, when Yvonne Waller was passing, I sat beside her bed and told her to, in a sense, that in moments, just listen for Jesus' voice calling you home. And there she will be reunited with her husband, Joe. For 70 years, they have been married. And to me, that is offering comfort to the dying. Comfort in the sense of knowing that they have a place prepared for them. So we as United Methodists believe very, very deeply in the fact that we leave this place from the arms of our loved ones to the very arms of the Lord. I myself can't think of a better death than to be surrounded by my loved ones, wishing me farewell, telling me how much They love me. And hearing those words then of Christ, welcome home. To me, that is what the comfort of heaven is. And so as we look at these verses, it has to associate with our understanding of what heaven is for us. What heaven is all about. The scripture itself is about that. That some will go and be called. We never know what time or what place. And fortunately for us, we never know when our time will come, when we are called home. But we never know, too, when Christ will come again. See, I take very seriously the second coming of Christ because it is predicted throughout the scriptures of his coming again to bring love, to bring this world. I believe that Christ is coming again. When and whenever, I don't know. But I do know that it is not time to panic. It is not time to be afraid. I believe as a young child who was trying to learn John 3:16, as he says, as he was trying to memorize it for his Sunday school class, he says, "For God so loved the world that those who believe in him will not panic, but will have everlasting life." And will not panic. I don't believe in scaring you to heaven. I don't believe in giving you horror stories in order that you might believe in Jesus, because I believe that Jesus came out of love and that God intended us to have a loving relationship, not created and motivated by fear, but more motivated because I want Christ to be in my heart. And I want his love to be a part of my life and to make a difference in the world. See, I believe that as God sent his Son out of love 2,000 years ago in Bethlehem, in the same way he will return out of love. Out of love for the world. The same love that he created this world, the same love that he sent his Son, and the same love will come as Jesus is coming to us. So how do we wait? How do we wait for his coming? The early chapters of Luke, in his Christmas story, we're introduced to an old man named Simeon, even older than me, but old, who had been told by God that before he died, he would see the face of the Messiah. And so as Simeon waited all of his life and watched, he stood by the temple there watching and waiting for the coming of the Messiah, for he knew and anticipated as he looked. And lo and behold, 8 days after Jesus was born, Mary and Joseph brought Jesus to the temple where he'd be presented before the Lord and before those and dedicated to God. And Simeon was there. And when Simeon saw the face of Jesus, he knew he saw the Messiah, the Christ. I invite you to look it up as he shares words with Mary, because she knew so well, but words of assurance that indeed the child that they were holding was dear and special. Now the word look that they used in writing this passage, that Simeon was a word that the Greeks often use as prodomeo. Prodomeo is a word that they have many words for the word look, but this is a different word. Pro meaning forward, like we proceed. And that's where our word proceed comes from. But we forward, and then demeo means to wait. Forward waiting. It means kind of like that anticipation we have. That hope that we have in our hearts. The hope and the anticipation that Simeon would someday see and welcome the Christ child, to see the Messiah before his very eyes. You see, prodomeo also used in the story of the prodigal son. As the father goes to the end of the lane, pro-demeo, looking forward, anticipating and hoping that his son would return home every day. It is that same longing that we have in our hearts, and it is the same kind of longing that we need as we move through this Advent season, this time of coming. But how do we pro-demeo? How do we wait forward? First of all, we need to realize that in Christ's coming, it brings meaning to our lives. As we remember God so loved the world, that this is not a purely accident, that the earth has ended up here, and by accident that we are born. It gives meaning and purpose to our lives to realize that we're a part of this world that God has created, and we've been created for a purpose. Secondly, it also reminds us that we are to wait forward with hope. Hope. Hope that this world will change. Right now, as we look at the news, we have those like Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Daesh and Boko Haram and all who have sworn to bring the apocalypse to the end of the world as we know it, that world that we know is that is predictable and comfortable, and that's what their motive and mission is, to destroy this world as we know it. And so we wait with hope because we have a stake in this world, wanting this world to be a better place. Not a world that is full of terrorists and destruction, but a world that is a better place than we left it. No greater lesson in my life is that when I became a parent, holding a child in your arms for the very first time, I grew up, and about that fast, suddenly the word responsibility became a part of my vocabulary. But holding Kim, our oldest, for the very first time, I began to realize that now I have a stake in the future. I began to realize as we rose and helped her to raise up that she does more than just cry and poop. She needs to be loved. She needs to be encouraged. She needs to be taught. She needs to be cared for. So now I have a stake in the future in this world, and so I forward wait with hope in my heart that I can make a difference in making this a better place for her and now my grandchildren. We all have a stake in this world. Not to become apathetic as if we can't do anything about it, but we can. We can either pray or we can be actively involved in making a difference and trying to make this world a better place. And lastly, we need to live each moment. Each moment. Because we never know when that last moment may be. To live each moment as if it is the best moment, in the sense of taking care of those times that we share with one another, with our loved ones. Counting each second and each step of our lives. There's a story I'm sure maybe I've shared with you before because it's one of my favorites. The story about a soldier named Ralph. See, there was a college professor that was invited to go to the army there to give us a speech about Christmas. And as he was picked up by the airport by Ralph, they met each other and introduced each other, and as they began making their way to go to the luggage, the baggage claim, he noticed that suddenly Ralph was absent from him. And he turned around and he'd see Ralph was helping a little old woman who was trying to get her bag that had fallen open and all of her stuff recollected and getting it sealed up and helping her with that. And then suddenly Ralph would come up with a smile, and as they walk and make their way, and then he would disappear again. He'd turn around and he'd see there he was, holding two children up to the drinking fountain to help them get drinks, as the mother was holding the third one in her arms, and they were both claiming that they wanted a drink. And so there he was, and as he got that accomplished, then he was making his way with a smile on his face. And then he was there when somebody was lost, giving them directions on how to find their way through this massive airport with the crowd of people. And after he was done that, he came with a smile and returned to the professor, and they began to walk, and the professor says, "Well, how do you do that?" And Ralph says, "Well, what?" "Well, you seem to be concerned about others. You're able to take care of them. You see their need and you take care of them." He says, "Well, I learned that in my tour of duty in Vietnam. You see, I worked on the mine detection team. And as we tried to clear the fields of the mines, I saw my friends being blown up before my very eyes. And so I knew that the next step I took could be my very last. So I live between the steps. I make every moment count." This morning, as we prepare ourselves, our hearts and our homes for Christmas, let us realize that we are part of something bigger than life, that we're part of this great plan of salvation for this world that God has created, a world out of love, and that we are to forward wait in the sense of waiting with hope and anticipation, and realize that we do have a stake in this world, and it's an important stake in making it better. And during this season of Advent, let us make our moments count. Let us make our moments count. That when we have an opportunity to say and to witness our faith of love and hope and peace and joy, whether it's standing in line at one of the stores, or whether we're passing on cookies to a neighbor, or whether we're just saying hello to somebody who may be a stranger, make that moment count. Because you do make a difference. Let us pray. Gracious and holy God, we thank you that in the midst of this season, you come and help us not to miss you. You come sometimes in those moments cherished with families as we decorate our trees or gather around our tables. You come in the precious moments as we're sharing a meal with a stranger or even a loved one. You come when we purchase a gift for a stranger. You come when we place some change or even some folding money in a kettle. You come. Come and enter our hearts again this Christmas. Amen.